Open source part 2. Today I want to talk about something I put together in 2020, and I had something similar to this all the way back in probably 2016 that I originally got from Allison Escalante and Sean McKean, and I think Ben Dodds worked on it, if I'm not wrong, who was a coach at Oregon at that time. But anyway, this is the K generator. I want to be clear, the disclaimer right at the start, this is not the best way to write a critique. Certainly the best way to write a critique is to dive deep into the literature base and then develop a position based on that, and to really understand the nuances of that position and the things associated with it so that you can write a better argument. And then obviously the better you are at debate, the more strategic you can be with that, and so on and so forth. This is for people who just want to write a K, have no idea what even goes in a K besides the 4 parts, and it gives you sort of a general strategic approach to doing that and simplifies it a lot. So, there's 4 parts to a K in theory, and framework is the first part. So the first thing that we have here in our K generator is the roll of the ballot. And the roll of the ballot is always something along the lines of vote for the team / advocacy that X, where X is critique specific and produces a negative ballot. There's no point really in reading a roll of the ballot that is not self-serving. Now, that's also why a lot of roll of the ballots are stupid and should be pretty easy to defeat upon any kind of refutation or analysis of them. But there's kind of this philosophy of when you read an argument in a debate that is a framing argument, do you try and meet people in the middle so that it seems reasonable, or do you just try and completely pave them out of the round? We see this a lot in value debate, and I am team pave them out of the round as best you can. It just makes the most sense strategically to me. Once you've established that roll of the ballot, obviously the first thing you have to do is explain what that means or looks like. And the second thing we do is provide reasons to prefer. So why is that a good way of evaluating the debate? Essentially, you're reading standards here as if it was theory. The first thing you want to have, pretty much always, I think, in any K framework, is an argument about why pragmatism / consequentialism fails, right? This is an explicit frame out of most likely the policy-based advocacy that the affirmative team read, because most of those are going to rely on this sort of notion of pragmatism or consequentialism. It's sort of an implicit it's not required to be in an AF, but every AF more or less that defends policy action and fiat is going to be presuming consequentialism / pragmatism are good. I was going to go deeper into that discussion, but let's just, for the sake of time, not go into that. Bisa point is that X is a precursor to effective policy. Now, obviously, X ties back to the original X here. When we were talking about our roll of the ballot, you want to make an argument for why doing the K comes before doing policy, why we can't have effective policy without doing it. And then a little subpoint there is this idea of structuralism / particularism. So if your K is being approached from a structuralist perspective, then you want to say prioritize structuralism, and particularisms are bad. And on the other hand, if you are in favor of particularisms, then you want to say structuralism is bad, right? Basically, what we're talking about here, for those of you who don't understand, if your K is just assuming a totalizing theory of sorts, it's probably structural in nature. Particularisms are usually something that policy AFs are going to say, right? They're going to say things like, even if prisons are bad, using them to lock up white supremacists is good. That's a particular example of why something that might structurally be bad can still be good. See the point? You always want to sneak in your little fiat is illusory. Most of these arguments are really bad, and if they get dropped, they're winners somehow. So you want to have one of these in your position. Decent point, using other framework causes some bad things, so just talk about why doing something besides the K probably excludes some group of people or leads to some kind of bad impact. And then 3, any analysis about why the K is topic specific. Usually you do this on the AF. One thing missing from this framework, because again, this is from 2022, it's a bit outdated, and this is not meant to be advanced by any means. Definitely the meta in parliamentary debate at the college level has become making skews evaluation claims. So saying that settler colonialism changes how we understand what is fair and what is educational. And so you can't even evaluate the AF unless you already vote for the K. You could make one of those silly arguments. Again, I think most of those don't make any sense, but they offer high strategic value, so consider that. Okay, so that brings us to the links. Links. Number 1, generic K links. So this is specific to your literature base, and essentially ends up being a reformism bad slash fails argument. So, what does your author or your K-lit base have to say about why making policies or incremental change or reformism or liberalism or whatever it might be is bad or is insufficient or can't ultimately solve for these issues? Because again, that's probably going to link to like every single type of app. Second, I highly recommend you have a topic specific slash advocacy specific links. Of course, a specific argument is always better than a generic one if you can come up with one. Third, having a link that is something to the effect of the link will end up turning the case slash being a no solvency argument. So I really like to have secret no solvency arguments or secret turns the case arguments in case, or even things that sort of take out the permutation, right? You're reading a link of the permutation rather, or to the permutation rather than just to the affirmative, so that when they try and read that argument, you can get rid of them. Good idea to have an argument for why fiat links, their impact links, or the rhetorical things they said links. You don't need all 6 of these. These are just like examples of how you would write links if you have no idea what you're doing and you're just trying to figure it out. Impacts, first thing I'd always like to have is a literature specific concept, right? So if there's some big thing like queer overkill in your literature base, right? Commodification, etc., whatever it might be, have that specific concept as your first major impact. And then secondarily, I think you always want to have some kind of extinction, no value to life, dehumanization, big stick thing, right? Something that's going to basically allow you to steal most of the impacts of the other team, or at least outweigh them in some major sense. Then we get to the alternative, which, it's just your cheater counter plan, right? Just think of it as a counter plan where you could just say we fiat anything, no matter how absurd that is, and you don't actually have to defend its fiat. Then you got to have your solvency. So you always want to have the alt solves the K's impacts, the alt solves the affirmative, and the alt alone is essential, right? So first one, we solve our own impacts. That's going to help you get around relink things of that nature. Second, we solve the AF. You almost certainly do not solve the AF, but you sort of, this is essentially framing the K as a floating pick. Floating pick is this idea that we do something nebulous that is not the AF, but still results in the AF or a resolution of the AF situation. A lot of people, like on a cap K, will make arguments as to why, like, well, getting rid of capitalism is what will solve all of those issues that the AF outlined in the first place. They only exist because capitalism exists. And then obviously the alt alone is essential, is another preempt to a perm. Fourth, perm fails. 5, disadd to the perm. And back in the day, I don't know if I agree with this anymore, but you'll see there it says, for example, anthro, butchery disadd. What I mean by that is people back in the day, I don't know if they still are doing this that much, but whenever they'd read a disadd to the perm, they'd always make it like literature specific and it'd be kind of silly. So if they were reading anthro and they're like, you shouldn't be mean to animals, they'd be like, the permutation is bad because it's butchery, right? You just chop up the alternative and use it for your own purposes, and that's what we do to animals, so it's the same situation there, right? That's kind of how it used to be in the old days. That is everything in this file, right? And so I just want to be clear that, again, this isn't the best way to write a K, but if you're just getting started, this is a really solid template for getting something on a piece of paper. And this is kind of really what I want to talk about for a second here in the video, and kind of what motivated me to make it independent of the K stuff. The most important thing when you are writing files or when you're writing a paper for school is just actually sitting your ass in a chair and then typing or writing something, right? You have to actually do that work. Stephen King, I'm sure most people here have heard Stephen King is one of the best-selling authors of all time. Famously, like every single day, this dude wakes up and writes 10 pages. And he doesn't care if they're good or if they're bad. He just writes 10 pages because that's how books get done, right? If you just do work, regardless of whether you're inspired or motivated or whatever, ultimately you'll have a product. This is a great starting point for you to get something on a sheet of paper and then reform it yourself or get someone else's eyes on it. And they can tell you like why this is a terrible approach to Ks. And even that is helpful for you. So again, this isn't going to give you the best K in the world, but if you're someone who is delving into a literature base, you've wondered about Ks and how to get started with them, I think this covers a lot of the bases that you would want to. It has some significant strategic value, right, hidden in some of the arguments throughout it that, when your opponent sees it, they don't literally see that you have like a pragmatism or consequentialism fails or like the K is a precursor to effective policy. They just see whatever your tagline is, but you know the utility of it, and therefore you can leverage that in the future. Short one today, streak stays alive, 13 days of Christmas, I guess. Bye.